Welcome back to another video. This is part 2 of my last video about quantum computing and the imminent threat it supposedly poses to Bitcoin's encryption. In this video, I will go through the stuff I didn't have time to get to in the last video because that story broke really quick all of a sudden on the day that I was ready to record that video anyway. So there was a bunch of new stuff I wanted to cover, and a bunch of stuff came up that I didn't get to cover. So watch that video if you haven't yet, and then come back and watch this one to the end, and you will have a much greater understanding of this topic, and you'll get a lot deeper than maybe some of the stuff you've seen out there, because a lot of it's pretty crazy. And when that story broke about a week ago, it more or less died the same day, like, and not even 24 hours later. It was basically dead, and people stopped talking about it because it was so quickly and thoroughly debunked as being absolute nonsense, as I said last time. So I'll get into that in a second, but first I want to go through this LinkedIn post that I think I mentioned last time, but I wasn't able to find it. Well, I found it, and it's by a guy named Andy Pattinson. He did a really good job of laying out this idea of it's really at least 10 different things wrapped up into one scary headline, and that's at the root of this whole FUD narrative and why it's so persistent. I mean, this has been going on for years and years. If you're new here, just understand that this is not something that just came out of nowhere and now it's a big deal and it wasn't before. Like, people have been saying this for over a decade at least. Like, I don't remember a time when this wasn't a thing that kept coming up, and it every few years or so. Now it's been more persistent the last couple of years, but for a while it was like every couple of years something would come out and be like, oh, this is going to be a threat one day, and then there'd be no noise on it whatsoever, and then it would come back around. But really, since I would say like late 2024, this has been a more or less persistent thing that keeps getting louder and louder. And that test project, whatever, last week made a lot of noise. But like I said, I'll get to that in a second. Right now, let's look at this. The 10 layers of Bitcoin quantum threat absurdity. And this is kind of along the same lines of the things I've said of how when you really think it through practically, it would be really hard, even if the technology exists, which it will one day, let's be clear. Like, I'm not saying this is a total lie in the sense of quantum computers aren't real. I'm just saying the threat is not real today, and it's further out than it's being presented as, and it's a lot more complicated than it's being presented as. So he lays it out really well here. There's 10 different assumptions you have to make for this thing to be real, for it to be an actual imminent threat of catastrophe. Number one, the breakthrough arrives soon, not in decades like a lot of scientists believe it really will be, but soon, in like, 18 months, 2-3 years, something like that. Number two, it's practically usable, not just theoretical, because a paper reducing resource estimates is not the same as a machine ready to run real world attacks with those resources. And that's referring to a paper that came out recently saying, oh, actually it'd be a lot easier to crack encryption like ECDSA that protects Bitcoin wallets. You wouldn't need nearly as many qubits or quantum processing power as we used to think. But again, that's just a paper. That's just theory. And even if it's right, even if it's 100% correct, that doesn't mean the tech exists yet. It doesn't mean it can be used, and it doesn't mean someone is going to be able to use it. So moving on. Number three, it works reliably at the required scale. Not theoretically, not a lab demo, not in a headline, in practice, and specifically against Bitcoin's cryptography. In this case, ECDSA is what we're talking about. Number four, access is concentrated in very few hands. This is not a every hacker gets one. I said this last time, that you're not just going to have a quantum laptop you can take home and hack stuff from your basement. It would almost certainly sit with nation states in a state lab or a tiny number of frontier firms, Google, IBM, large first world governments. Like, those are the only people who could ever have this kind of equipment, because it's a big, massive machine that requires a lot of infrastructure to actually function. Number 5, the actor with access keeps it secret. They don't disclose it, they don't coordinate, they hide the capability because they would have to be able to carry out an attack like this. Number 6, they choose attack over advantage preservation. Instead of protecting the breakthrough, monetizing it elsewhere, using it for higher value scientific intelligence or strategic purposes, they decide to burn it offensively. And that's a really good point, because if you do that, if you decide, okay, I have this thing, I'm going to use it specifically to attack Bitcoin, well, now it's done. Once you do that, everyone knows the cat's out of the bag, and you can't use it again, because doing so would be illegal, not in the sense of taking coins would be illegal, unless you're stealing from an exchange, then it would be. But if you're just taking Satoshi's coins, for example, that wouldn't be technically illegal, but using the quantum computer for that would almost certainly be illegal. But again, that's something we don't even fully know for sure, because we're venturing so far out on the spectrum of theory. This whole thing is sort of like a wild conspiracy theory with one little kernel of truth in it. Number 7, they decide Bitcoin is the best target, not state communications, defense, science, pharmaceuticals, or energy. Got to be Bitcoin. Number 8, they decide the economics makes sense. One of the most expensive and valuable machines ever built, strategically valuable machines ever built, gets used for what is effectively a very loud, globally visible act of financial sabotage. Because that's the only thing anyone could think to do with it, right? Number 9, they accept the consequence, legal, political, market, diplomatic, and reputational consequences, including attacking an asset held by public companies, ETFs, institutions, and millions of ordinary people. That's another thing, right? You're not just attacking Bitcoin and the individuals who hold it. You would effectively be attacking, BlackRock, Coinbase, Fidelity, like all these huge companies, banks, asset managers that hold Bitcoin. You would be sabotaging them. So even if it wasn't illegal what you did, if you tanked the market and destroyed confidence and all that, and people knew you were the one who did it, you'd at least be facing some heavy lawsuits, right? Because they wouldn't just let that happen. So number 10, Bitcoin fails to adapt in time. And notice that all the conversations you hear about this, for the most part, only revolve around like 3 of these points maybe. I mean, the breakthrough arrives soon, that's talked about, that's debated. They decide Bitcoin is the best target, that's debated. And Bitcoin fails to adapt in time. That's talked about a lot. Despite being software, despite upgrade paths, despite migration options, despite researchers already working on post-quantum approaches, and despite the issue being understood for years, and the Bitcoin faces an imminent quantum threat narrative isn't just one claim, it's 10 stacked assumptions compressed into one scary headline. And it is a serious long-term engineering topic, but a serious topic doesn't mean serious framing. Calling it an imminent existential threat is not analysis, it's just fear merchandising. Totally agree with that. Really good post here again by Andy Pattinson. And moving on, someone commented on the last video saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. They didn't provide any evidence or counter argument as to why I don't know what I'm talking about or what I was wrong about. If you agree with that sentiment, I would encourage you to leave a comment and explain where I'm wrong, why I don't know what I'm talking about, and what else needs to be added to this conversation. Seriously, go ahead and do that. I would love that. But it got me thinking, while I'm not an expert on, quantum computing per se, I have been hearing about this, like I said, for at least a decade. The topic has come and gone many times. And not only that, I've done some of my own research, and I actually worked on this piece right here for Mara in 2024. They've since taken it down, so I had to go on the Wayback Machine right here to find it. They have new stuff on the subject. I guess they took down the old stuff for whatever reason. But we worked on this for weeks, me and the other people in the marketing team at Mara. It was called Bitcoin versus Quantum Computing, More Hype Than Reality. And if you want to find the whole thing, you'd have to go on the Wayback Machine yourself and search for the title. on the Mara website. It's mara.com. You can see right here, this is the URL. And it goes through a bunch of stuff. I won't go through all of it, just try to skim through it real quick, but talks about the encryption here. The one that we're talking about is elliptic curve digital signature algorithm that protects private keys. And there are these other algorithms, Shor's and Grover's, that theoretically could be used by a quantum computer to break ECDSA and figure out the private key and then just steal people's coins. One issue is how far are we from that being a real possibility? And at the time this was written, the big story was Google announced a new quantum processor called Willow that had 105 qubits. It's this big breakthrough. When really, it's estimated that it would take about 13 million qubits to actually break Bitcoin's encryption. And there's this graph about Moore's law, but then even that was called into question, right? We bring up this, and a lot of people caught on to this kind of thing, right? It's not like we were the only ones saying this. And so then, coincidentally, that paper came out some weeks ago saying, oh, actually, it would only take like 2,000 qubits. Another thing to mention there is that the amount of qubits required, there's also a time factor, right? So with 13 million qubits, you could break ECDSA in about 1 hour. With 2,000 or so, you might be able to break it in, I think it was a year or two. I think it was 2 years. I think that was the conversation I had with the CTO at the time. He was saying that if you had 2,000 qubits, you may be able to break it in 2 years. So in other words, you would have to run something like Shor's algorithm on a quantum computer for 2 years straight to be able to achieve this. And we're at about 105 qubits now. So even if it gets to 2,000 next year, it would still take 2 years after that. And all of that is extremely optimistic, right? Like that is not, in all likelihood, that is not happening. I'm not going to go into the Moore's law thing too much because this is often debated. People say it's changing, especially with AI. Technology is advancing faster. But this is like the chart from computer progress from decades past up until now. So theoretically, the fastest time frame, if the number of qubits doubles every 9 months, then we would be at, see, here's 4 million, 20 million, somewhere in between, maybe like 2033 or so. It's possible by then the computers could be strong enough to break it in 1 hour. So maybe 6 years from now, it will be a more urgent threat. That's a possibility. But that's probably the soonest it could ever be. And it probably won't even be that soon. And then there's a lot of other stuff about why Bitcoin's resilient to these quantum advances, because public keys are only revealed when you spend your coins. So if you self-custody your coins and you don't spend from that wallet, then even if a quantum computer does come online, it's not going to be able to figure out your private key. Those keys are still safe. And here's an interesting post from Satoshi talking about how strong SHA-256 is. That's the algorithm for Bitcoin mining. And the important part is, he says, if there was some kind of threat, we could transition to a new hash in an orderly way. Software would be programmed, start using a new hash after a certain block number. Everyone would have to upgrade by that time. The software could save the new hash of all the old blocks to make sure a different block with the same old hash can't be used. So basically just upgrading the software and having everyone switch to that version. And there's people who are working on this. This guy, Hunter Beast, at CryptoQuick on Twitter, I think he was the one working on BIP 360, which is a post-quantum wallet address update being proposed for Bitcoin. And then it's a threat to all kinds of things, not just Bitcoin. And that was it, basically. So I may not know everything about the subject, but I know a little more than most people who are just fear-mongering about it, I would say. And again, if I'm wrong, go ahead and let me know. I'm not going to have time to get through all of this, but here's somebody on Twitter who sent me all kinds of stuff. Apparently this person he competed with whoever won the prize rather, at this Project 11 thing. And he's saying that he submitted the same work but didn't get the prize even though he submitted it earlier. So that's why he's mad about it and is saying the whole thing's a scam, more or less. And look at all this he gave me. I appreciate this, but I don't think I'm going to read every part of it. I'm just going to try to get through the important parts. So he's trying to explain it simply. What happened was that Project 11 ran a competition saying, hey, if you can break the biggest elliptical curve cryptographic key using a quantum computer, you win a prize, which is 1 Bitcoin, about 78,000 US dollars at the time. He's a self-taught independent researcher from Jacksonville. No university, no lab, no funding. What he did, he ran Shor's algorithm, I mentioned that earlier, on real IBM quantum hardware and recovered private keys from a 9-bit all the way up to a 16-bit. Every result can be verified here at this link. I'm not clicking any links. And he says he says he has all the receipts here. He submitted it one day before the deadline. Here's the ID. They gave the prize to an Italian Microsoft cloud architect named Giancarlo Lelli for a 15-bit result, smaller than his because his was 16-bit, submitted later than his. Problems with the winner, he copied my code. This person says, my key function was written December 20th, 2025. He provides all the info here. His identical function appeared April 5th, 2026. Same logic, name, pattern. His repo was public for months. Specific technical figure appears verbatim in his README file. He says he derived this empirically from his own failed experiments. It exists in no published paper anywhere. That's interesting. He says the winner's job IDs don't exist. There's no timestamps in any log. Impossible numbers. The free plan is impossible. Here's an interesting point. The guy said he ran everything, the guy who won the prize, claims he ran everything on IBM's free plan, 10 minutes of quantum computer time per month. But this guy who sent me this message said that the 16-bit run alone took him 81 minutes. The guy who won, the jobs he claimed he did would require at least 739 seconds. And that math is impossible since that's more than 10 minutes. And he couldn't have possibly done that on the free plan. So he's got to at least be lying about that. And apparently there's no 15-bit result in his repo. His GitHub repo contains no 15-bit result anywhere. They jump from 10-bit to 16-bit. The result they awarded him for doesn't exist in his own submission. And Project 11 blocked him after he raised all this publicly. And a really important point here, it's proven that this is classically replicable. Another independent researcher, I remember seeing this when it came out, replaces IBM Quantum backend with dev/urandom, a basic random number generator on any laptop. He recovered every single key that this guy claimed to recover with the quantum computer identically. It means no quantum computer was even needed at all. And then he goes on to talk about how that Project 11 raised millions from Coinbase Ventures and other investors, and their whole business is just selling fear about quantum computers threatening Bitcoin. And they needed a prize to validate the narrative. That's really crazy. I had no idea like it went this deep. Honestly, I didn't even expect this when I started doing this research. I mean, I made a video, I think like a month ago, about how some people publishing big stories on Cointelegraph and elsewhere talking about the quantum threat actually have their own quantum proof token that they're trying to sell you. So this is another even bigger avenue of that kind of scam where there's an obvious financial incentive there to keep pushing this narrative. And I think that's going to be it. This one's already gotten way longer than I expected it to be. I'm going to leave it at that. You get the picture, right? So Again, if you have any rebuttals to this or know of anything that was factually incorrect, go ahead and let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the Hard Money Dispatch newsletter. Big things coming soon there. Be sure to subscribe, submit your email. It's free, and I'll keep you updated on things like this in your inbox. And be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you.